Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I think my colleague, the Minister of State in the Ministry of Finance, member for Christchurch, East Central, gave an exposition with reference to this bill for about 2.5 hours earlier today. I know that that is the time allotted to me, at least, but I would want to venture to suggest to you, I will do my very best not to go that long. I can't quite give you the undertaking, but I will do my very best not to go that long. Now, the Honourable Member, very early in his presentation, Mr. Speaker, suggested that the bill before us, this customs bill, is part of a framework for modernization of the customs framework to be operated in Barbados in order to strategically reposition the Barbados economy. I thought that to be a very noble and worthwhile objective if the bill is part of a framework of modernization designed to strategically help reposition the Barbados economy. That is an objective that is laudable and is absolutely necessary. Well, I was disappointed as the Honourable Member carried on. Now, I didn't hear much with reference to that particular matter as to specifically how we would rearrange our customs framework to reposition strategically, those are important words, the Barbados economy. We may, with what was presented, what was exposed with reference to the bill, make some significant adjustments in how we do things at the level of the customs in Barbados. But I think the exposition given to us did not necessarily fully suggest, or come anywhere near fully suggesting, that what is envisioned is a strategic repositioning of the Barbados economy. I think, in fact, a government without a viable vision for growth in the Barbados economy, I'm yet to be convinced that this government is possessed of a sense of viable vision for growth. And a government without a viable vision for growth in the Barbados economy is not likely to have a fully and properly conceptualized vision and framework for the operations of customs in Barbados towards the end of repositioning the Barbados economy. If we are to reposition the Barbados economy, there are some significant things that must be done, and the customs framework that we put in place must serve to pursue those goals. We have to have improved competitiveness in Barbados, Mr. Speaker. You are not an economist, and I am not an economist, but we both know that. Barbados has now left behind that era in which the economy of Barbados existed and operated, where we were the beneficiaries of trade preferences in the global market space. In our relationships, to some extent, with North America under the CBA, Caribbean Basin Initiative, to some extent, limited extent, more so with respect to how we operated with reference to the Canadian jurisdiction. But globally, parts of Europe as well, globally, we have left that era behind, so we are not benefiting now. And it's not expected that we can rest upon a premise that suggests our economy, because it is underpinned by a privileged position of preferences with reference to trade, can be viable. We have passed that stage. That era is behind us. So if we're going to talk about repositioning strategically the Barbados economy, you have to tell us how are we going to improve our competitiveness. And if you relate it to that bill, you must tell me in no uncertain terms how this bill reflects that. And if it is not altogether presented in this bill, how does the fuller framework for customs modernization reflect that determination, not only a desire, to address the issue of competitiveness in the Barbados economy? If we are going to strategically reposition the Barbados economy, Mr. Speaker, second thing, we have to treat to the matter of export efficiency. Export efficiency. Barbados economy is characterized by high import orientation. We are an importing jurisdiction. The slightest cough anywhere in the world, slightest shock causes a trauma for us. And the exposure to which we are subject as a vulnerable economy in this very competitive global world suggests to us in very clear and distinct terms that we have to engage ourselves in the serious business of facilitating export efficiency, and the entity which is the Customs Department of Barbados must be a critical cog in that wheel, a critical entity in that exercise because of the openness, and that's the term I think the economists use, attaching to the Barbados economy in relation to imports vis-a-vis gross domestic product. And therefore, Mrs. Speaker, all I'm simply saying is it must be conceptualized of the Customs Department, the way it is structured, the way it operates, how it is modernized and how it is facilitated in its operations must be so designed as to help us to achieve much higher levels of export efficiency if we are going to significantly attack that issue of import dependency. If you are going to reposition the Barbados economy, you have to address the matter of import dependency. And you do that by escalating your capacity to have greater levels of efficiency with reference to exports. The Honourable Member mentioned, perhaps just about in passing, perhaps a little bit more than in passing, and this is where I thought that for one instance, perhaps he did connect with the whole idea of strategically repositioning the Barbados economy, and that's when he dealt with the matter of growth in the transshipment business. Barbados, because of its geography, Barbados because of its capacity, Barbados because of several other features about itself as a jurisdiction, is well placed to improve its performance and to increase its gains in the area of transshipment business, not only with reference to jurisdictions nearer to us and that constitute part of our geographical area, but with jurisdictions farther afield. Barbados is strategically placed by geography, strategically placed by our infrastructure and our capacity to be seriously more motivated to benefit, deliberately so, from efforts to increase the transshipment, growth in transshipment business, and the Honourable Member did mention that in passing. Of course, there must be increased revenues, increased revenue collection, increased revenue generation, because this facilitates government's ability to engage more so in infrastructural or capital development, which is based on its capacity to fund from domestic financing those projects. A lot of the capital works that we do are funded by borrowed foreign dollars, borrowed foreign financing. And we need to be able to do a bit, and this is in part, and I think this is understood by everybody, why the customs is so critical. We have to improve revenue generation. We have to improve revenue collection, because we want to change the dynamics in the domestic economic space, in the domestic economy. Not every piece of infrastructural development capital works has to be necessarily funded by foreign dollars. We have to borrow, pay back in those same foreign dollars over time. But some of this can be generated from local domestic capital once the capacity of the entity in the front line with a responsibility for so collecting is able to collect, and therefore we can generate in the domestic space those additional dollars that we are seeing. The point perhaps more largely we're speaking to here is beyond developing the capacity to fund some of our own infrastructural development with domestic dollars. The point that we're speaking to here is to reduce our reliance or tendency or disposition towards foreign borrowing. Now, that is a phrase which is becoming more and more familiar, but becoming more and more difficult for me to say because it comes with a sense of pain when we appreciate, come to an understanding of how much we are borrowing from abroad. And it seems now almost every day we come away to some news from the Ministry of Finance is that we have now acquired this loan and we've now borrowed that and we're now borrowing this. Now, borrowing is necessary, but when you borrow, you have to repay. And if you are going to be in a position to repay, then you have to earn and generate that with which you repay. And if you're borrowing for foreign dollars, then you have to repay those foreign dollars. Then you have to repay those foreign dollars, and that is all I'm saying. And if you are going to strategically reposition the economy, you can't think about that and talk about that without reference to what you do about your profile when it comes to foreign borrowing. Now, this government and the administration, before particularly so, relied heavily on borrowings from the National Insurance Scheme, from the Central Bank of Barbados. That has landed us into some difficulty. This government came and, in a sense, by reneging on the debt to the NIS, reneging on the debt to the central bank, indulging in this debt restructure, in a sense, Mr. Speaker, was reflecting the same type of disposition that administrations feel we can borrow, we can borrow, and we can borrow. Well, that is the economic model of the past, and it needs to be seen to be receding into the distance behind us because we need to earn, yes. We need to produce more domestically that will cause a spillover in dollars in the domestic economy, and we need to be able to position ourselves such that we can derive more foreign dollars from earnings of revenue in relation to borrowings. And then, of course, Mr. Speaker, to the extent that we can improve the framework operating around the customs, we can enhance and add to the investment appeal of Barbados. Is customs a part of that effort? We want to make Barbados as appealing as possible, as attractive as possible to investors at home and investors from foreign fields. Is the customs a critical part of that effort and exercise? I think it is, Mr. Speaker. And if you are going to talk about repositioning strategically so the Barbados economy, you must be talking about helping to develop and improve investment profile for Barbados such that we become more attractive and more appealing as a jurisdiction. Now, I speak of domestic investment, I speak as foreign investment. People will be loath to put their money into investment in ventures in the country, either domestically, that is as investors, or foreign interests, will be loath to do so if they feel that around the operations of the customs entity in Barbados, there are going to be some impediments that will thwart their efforts. So all I'm saying is, if we are going to talk about a strategic repositioning of the economy, these 6 or 7 things to which I make mention are absolutely necessary. And I did not hear a lot of reference to some of these. We must platform Barbados globally as a globally reputed jurisdiction with a high sense and profile of integrity in our systems. Now, this is important. We live in the era of corruption. We live in an age and in a space and in a time when the international institutions with fixed gaze focus upon domains and jurisdictions such as Barbados. This particular parliament in these sittings have, in many instances, had to come here to make legislative amendments to comply with international prescriptions, international regulations, international commitments. And I'm saying that the customs entity in Barbados has a critical role to play in helping Barbados to attain the kind of integrity profile around its systems for business, around its market systems, such that the world cannot look on us with any accusing eye. If you are going to reposition the Barbados economy, this is important as well, and customs has a significant role to play in that. Now, customs is very much, in my view, a creature of the Ministry of Finance. I say this, Mr. Speaker, I've said this before in different words perhaps, but I say it again. We have a problem with our tax structure in Barbados, in my view. And a lot of people point accusing fingers at the Customs Department in Barbados when it comes to duties and all kinds of tariffs and stuff like that. But the Customs Department is a creature of the Ministry of Finance as far as I'm concerned. And therefore, to a certain extent, what happens to be the reality when you have to interface with customs starts with policy emanating at Bay Street. And if therefore you are going to reposition the Barbados economy, you have to look at the type of taxation policy that is emanating out of the bosom of Bay Street. Government taxation policy. People cry out, and the minister himself, Honourable Minister, member when he spoke, alluded to this. People point accusing fingers at the Customs Department, when in fact, all they're doing is complying with regional arrangements, complying with international arrangements, and just falling in line with the tax and duty structure which is given. The point I'm making is that some of this emanates out of Bay Street. If we are going to strategically reposition the Barbados economy, we have to look at the tax structure that comes out of the bosom and brains of Bay Street. Just those 7 things, and I want to move on, because the Honourable member did say at the beginning of his presentation and towards the end, this is about repositioning strategically so the Barbados economy for life in this modern world. But we can't do it unless we look at these 6 or 7 things I've mentioned, and of course, there are others. Customs is not simply, Mr. Speaker, a revenue collection agency. If you have that view of it, then it's a very limited view. Customs is critically so part of our defense architecture in this country we call Barbados. Monitoring the movement, policing the movement of commodities, and not only commodities in my view, but essentially it is part of that defensive border security architecture that we have mounted. We get that in our Coast Guard, we get that in the Royal Barbados Police Force, we get that in the Immigration Department, but I think Customs is critically very much a part of that. So if we see Customs only as a revenue collection agency, our vision, understanding of its role is rather limited and needs to be reviewed, because it's very much part of that defensive architecture, defense mechanism that we have in place here to protect our democracy, to protect our economy, to protect our national well-being. Now, after dealing some practicalities, and I hope I am understood and not misrepresented, Customs in Barbados is reputed to be, and I'm using my words carefully, because I know somebody will get up and say that the Honourable member for St. Michael West accused the customs officers of Barbados of being corrupt. I am not, Mr. Speaker, very clearly, I am not doing any such thing. But one of the realities with which we have to reckon is that Customs is reputed to be one of the most corrupt agencies, public agencies in Barbados. The honorable member, when he spoke, made a very pertinent point. And he talked about perception, and I'm talking about perception. And he says perception, if it is not addressed, and perception, if it is not corrected, becomes the reality. And I agree with him. That which is perceived, if it is not countered effectively, becomes the reality insofar as people are concerned. That is why this government tries so hard to mount a very positive image in messaging of itself, because it wants to create a certain perception of itself in the minds of people that is the best government ever to have existed in Barbados. I'm not arguing that today. I'm just illustrating the use. I am just illustrating what I'm trying to say. And so you can command a dominant, a prominent presence in social media. You can so command your access and use of Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation television such that use becomes abuse. And those are realities. But that is another discussion for another day. Today we're talking about customs. And perception can become a reality if it is left unchecked and uncorrect. Where this perception exists, that the customs agents, the customs department, the customs officers in Barbados constitute one of the most corrupt entities, it has to be countered. Now, I want to say here today, and I believe in these things very strongly, and I've said it with reference to the police, and I'm not sure, I couldn't say with certainty how customs officers are remunerated in Barbados relative to other functionaries in Barbados or elsewhere in the region. But if customs is in the forefront of revenue collection for Barbados, if customs is in the forefront of defense of Barbados, as with other entities I earlier mentioned, then we have to ask ourselves, are they properly dealt with, treated, taken care of, remunerated? Now, the government has to answer that, because I think that corruption is given a rolled wicket, a good wicket on which to bat when people in the front line, functionaries in the front line of critical aspects of the life of this country are not properly remunerated. Then the wicket is rolled for those who are of corrupt impulses to see them as a clear and primary target. And I believe that. Yeah, treat the police properly. Treat these people who constitute this front line for us in two very significant areas of national life and economic well-being. Treat them properly and make sure that they have the best possible deal. So we have to counter that perception of corruption. Where the reality exists, we have to treat to the reality as well. Because gains from corruption can easily far exceed salary and other aspects of remuneration. Where there is a misplaced perception with respect to corruption, it has to be countered, it has to be corrected. And my question to the Honourable Minister is, what is being done? If there is the perception of corruption, and that is all it is, what is being done? And if the reality of corruption does exist, what is being done by the Ministry of Finance to counter that reality? And I think that those are serious questions. Mr. Speaker, I've spoken before about this. I do not know the extent to which it has changed. But I know customs officers have to go off-site to do customs clearances of containers which are lodged on private premises. And I think that that is not only done here, it is done elsewhere. But my understanding is that there are in other jurisdictions in existence mechanisms to seriously minimize the possibility of such well-meaning officers doing their job, being exposed to the corrupt instincts and corrupt impulses of unethical business people. And when you send one or two female officers, a male or female officer, even two male officers, to have to deal with a couple of containers on a private property, and if you run into a situation where you are dealing with an unethical person bent on, is quasi-criminal a proper phrase, Mr. Speaker, you're a lawyer, bent on quasi-criminal or wholly criminal activity, then I think you expose perhaps honest people to a peril to which they should not be exposed. So the question is, how can we deal with that? If that must be part of a reality that everything can't be checked at the port, the time frames don't allow it, the physical spacing doesn't allow it, the capacity attaching to the processes don't allow it, and it has to be done off-site. What are we doing to minimize the risk to these officers, the perils to which they are exposed? We live in very difficult times in Barbados, where honest people, under certain circumstances, can behave in less than honest ways if it is just but for that one instance. And Mr. Speaker, if that is not a problem in Barbados, I would that the minister, when he wraps up, would tell us that. But I still say we should not, beyond the need to do so, we should not, beyond that point of need to do so, expose honest men and women to unscrupulous people with mindsets for nefarious ends. Corruption works on either side of the fence. There's a misrepresentation sometimes in the place of origin of goods, commodities. I think the Honourable Minister referred to that. That is addressed in this bill at section 72, I think in 76. And that is the other side over there of the issue, where importers or brokers or what have you could misrepresent the place of origin of goods in an effort to benefit or to circumvent the financial obligations attaching to importing. Then there's under-invoicing or undervaluing. And I remember several years ago, this was a big problem in Barbados. Do not know the extent to which it does now exist because we don't talk about it so loudly, at least I don't hear. But that comes from the other side of the coin as well. Undervaluing, under-invoicing. It is part of the culture of corruption that obtains in countries all around the world. This side, on the other side, this side of the coin, there of course is the cursive examination, the very fast and fleeting examination and wave on by an accommodating functionary of the government. And of course, the bigger business of official waivers. And I do not know to the extent that when it comes to these waivers, there's a proper mechanism in place for accountability, and that mechanism is a transparent one. These waivers, I presume, go down every day in Barbados, operating under somebody's hand, somebody's signature, and waivers take place. Now, how do we determine who benefits from these waivers? Are there specifically set criteria? Are they left to just perhaps personal preferences, perhaps personal connections? All of these are part of the dynamics of a culture of corruption, Mr. Speaker, which needs to be addressed. So it is not only corruption, even if only in perception, attaching to customs officers in the whole business of import and movement of goods, import of commodities. There's a potential for corruption. And where it exists, we have to deal with it, because corruption is one of those things that leaves a country bereft of the fuller benefit of the revenue and finances that it is able to generate. Question, honorable member again, when he spoke specifically, distinctly, and I don't recall him making any wider reference than to the Bridgetown port and the airport. Unless I am mistaken, we have one or two other official ports of entry, at least one. I heard no reference to these ports of entry or this port of entry. What happens? I think I do recall that when the first one was established in the north, there was much ado about ensuring that there was customs and police and immigration on immediate site to deal with issues. I do not know what obtains now. We never hear of any problems associated, at least I don't hear. And I have to admit my ears are not always open to everything. So maybe it's said and I don't hear it. But we never hear of any incidents, with reference to any misdoings, any attempted criminal activity, any unexplained activity at these other ports outside of the Bridgetown port. Occasionally you hear about this discovery being made at Bridgetown port. You hear about this body being arrested at the Adams airport. But I don't hear of anything coming out, anything untoward coming out of these other places of entry. And I want to know if it is that there are no issues, or is it that the issues are not reported, or is it that we shut a blind eye? We shut a blind eye or have a deaf ear to what is happening in these places. The fact that there are no reports, to me, is a very strange thing in the Barbados of today. We talk about ensuring that we have the requisite scanners down at the Bridgetown port. We didn't have for a long time, we are told, so that we have guns and drugs coming through the port. We're better able now to surveil what happens. But what about guns and drugs coming through these other ports? I heard no mention of these. If they don't exist anymore, please put me right and tell me they don't exist. If they do exist, please help me to understand what is happening with reference and how are they so properly managed that there are no incidents, untoward incidents ever reported or associated with these places. What is the quantity, if any, of drugs seized coming through those places? Have we discovered any amount of cash is coming through those places? I mean, can these places be spoken of in this honorable chamber, Mr. Speaker? I would dare to ask. It cannot only be the Bridgetown port, where poor people and small businessmen of a certain hue do their business. It must be that in other avenues of access into this country, legally established and acknowledged, it must be that we can deal with those things if they're happening there. Now, the customs, of course, with an efficient quality of functioning, can help to facilitate trade. I think I've said enough to suggest that earlier. We also have to acknowledge that we have to expand our trade, not only potential trade capacity or trade earnings, if we are to put Barbados on a better economic footing. And then we have to acknowledge that inefficiencies in the system and the presence of corruption is a significant cost to the country. Millions of dollars, which will hamstring the government in its ability to undertake localized domestic infrastructural projects under the hand of my honorable friend from St. Michael, West Central, the Minister of Public Works and Transport, will prevent the government from fulfilling its social welfare obligations to the people of Barbados under the capable and caring hands of my honorable former friend from St. Thomas. And I think, Mr. Speaker, when the country loses, the psalmist once said, I would rather fall into the hands of a God who is dispensing his wrath than into the hands of my enemies. So if my honorable friend leaves me in the hands of God, I thank her very much for that. The capable hands of God saved me from the hands of some of her colleagues. I would very much appreciate it. And so this corruption can cost the country a lot of millions of dollars, Mr. Speaker, and then they can't provide the welfare assistance to the people in the Pine, or in Richmond, or in Park Road, or Savannah Road, or Goddings Road, or Waterford. Where else you go, Mrs. Speaker? Dean's Village. and the people are relying, especially in this day and age, on that help that comes from the government. And these things, therefore, impede and imperil the state capacity to provide for its citizens in meaningful ways. Now, the Asecuda automatic system we've heard about a bit, it's mentioned in this bill, controls, we're using basically technology, specific programs to help to synchronize the business of customs with other public service entities in Barbados. We talk about creating a one-stop, a single window, one-stop shop. That's all right, and that's necessary in this day and age. Reduce some of the impediments that constitute non-tariff barriers to trade, and also, therefore, hamstring the economy. So it is good that we can go down that road. There are two concerns I have with that, and one is the issue of cybersecurity in Barbados is one to which I think we are not paying sufficient attention at this time. And the more and more you use technology, and the more and more information and data collected using the technology, especially if you talk about interlinked single window technology capacity and platforms, then cybersecurity becomes an issue. And I would trust that this government is putting some attention, giving some attention to the matter of cybersecurity. It is all right to sound good and to look good and to have the equipment, but if this is not properly secured, you are exposing people's business to the wind and to the world. You're exposing yourself to security perils, and it has happened elsewhere in developed countries, no less. And I think as you develop technological platform for providing government services, for facilitating better access to those services, for interlinking, saving time, and reducing those non-tariff impediments and barriers to trade, you gotta be concerned with security. The other thing I would be concerned about would be the matter of its impact on its implications for staff complement and jobs. Because if you are, it's all right to talk about the paper business and the use of paper and the threats attaching to the use of paper, the downside of the issue, the use of paper. But if you shift to technology, you can find yourself, especially in an economy such as Barbados, where we need to find every possible job, you can have a situation where workers are displaced. So what are the implications for customs staff and staff complement? What are the implications for employment opportunity in the customs among those who now exist and those who perhaps aspire to work in that field? Or what are the implications for the increased use of technology, the interlinking of these single window, one shop platforms? This is a serious concern in an economy like Barbados, where employment, where jobs are at a premium, where we continue to see 30+% unemployment among our young people, where we continue to see people leaving our university despite the best efforts of our Honourable Minister of Education to educate the entirety of our youthful population and to give them the best possible education. And they work hard and do well in difficult circumstances, and they come out and they can't find a job. Use of technology has implications for all of these. A government with a viable vision for growth takes cognizance of those things. And you do not move peg 1 without making a reference to how it affects peg 2. And so 30-some plus unemployment rate among young people, graduates coming out of university can't find work, high unemployment rate and growing among female members of our potential work population and a high employment rate among males. And of those who can boast of employment, sometimes the most menial of jobs. The most menial of jobs, given in a situation where we want to make them feel like that's the best that they can aspire to. All I'm saying is, Mr. Speaker, these are some of the things that we have to consider if we are talking about putting in place frameworks and mechanisms to strategically reposition the Barbados economy. And I thank you. Short enough?
Honourable member for St. Michael's South.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker, sir. I intend to make a very brief contribution to this discussion, sir, in the hope that I could add some value in relation to what we are doing in the Bridgetown Port as it relates to the natural synergies between what we are doing and what the Customs Department and the other government departments really that operate inside the port are doing. Because while this is a customs bill, sir, nothing happens in customs by customs officers themselves or alone. It is really an entire set of government agencies, sir, that are working together daily to improve the efficiency in the Bridgetown Port, sir, and the services that we offer to Barbadians. And the opposition leader is right in a way. There are more issues at stake here than just revenue collection. The opposition leader is right in a way, sir, meaning that he is wrong in many other ways. But, sir, you know, I had to do it, Joe. You know I love you. But, sir, the reality is that customs, sir, is about revenue generation, it is about security, and it must be about efficiency. And that none of us set out to do just one. A responsible government must be able at the same time, sir, to be effectively able to do all three of these things. And, sir, in terms of customs, sir, customs all over the world, especially in developing countries, not just in Barbados, but all over the world, and certainly in the Caribbean. We have situations, sir, where customs procedures are often unharmonized and unclear. And that we felt it necessary to be able to offer greater harmony in the way that we do things, sir, to make it clearer, sir, to set standards, because where there are no standards, you may have the same basic set of circumstances resulting in different consequences, conditions, taxes being charged by people, sir. And we know, sir, in Barbados that sometimes that happens. 1 minute, or could have happened before, 1 minute you pay this, the next minute, same thing, different rate, no explanation, sir, no understanding of the systems. So we needed, sir, to be able to rectify these systems, sir. And that for us, this bill is a critical step to be able to do so. It's not really about trying to, meet our international obligations, although we must. But, sir, we're a sovereign country, determined, sir, to be able to offer the best-in-class kind of service. And so, therefore, these are things that we must do. There is also the reality, I began my working life as a customs officer in the VAT office. And my first job was a tax officer in the value-added tax department, trained in customs and customs procedure and trained in VAT and so on. And that was a few years ago. And in some ways, sir, in terms of our capacity to be able to digitally move the needle forward, sir, in some ways we hadn't really improved. And it is therefore going to be very important for us that we have now much more computerization, sir. We have an integrated customs management to be able to better do and deliver the things that we are charged with responsibility to be able to better deliver and so on. So when we speak of the single window, sir, so it may sound like just talk, but the single window, especially the maritime single window, is important. You have circumstances now where a ship may come to Barbados and has to fill out the same forms 5 times, 6 times, 7 times. A single window now takes all of that out of the thing. You fill it in one time and it goes to the various who requires what, sir, in terms of security, sir, and protocols, will get the information that they need. But it's about becoming a lot more efficient than we traditionally have been. We also have now put in place the file, and I hope to be able to finish that debate here in a few weeks, sir, the facilitation of maritime traffic bill that I hope we're able to finalize very soon, sir. That speaks to us being able to offer that kind of just-in-time delivery of service. It's really about improving everything that we do, sir. And of course, when we got Asikuda going, sir, there were some challenges, but when we got Asikuda going, sir, that too improved the level of efficiency, sir. So these are things that are coming. But any time I have meetings, sir, I chair the Cabinet Subcommittee on Port Efficiency. Minister Strong, sir, attends these meetings frequently. There is a recognition, sir, that while I hear the opposition leader in terms of what happens to staff, there is also recognition, sir, that to do things better, even though we might add computerization, there are going to be circumstances where we need more physical bodies just to be able to deliver. And I know that customs remains somewhat understaffed. And to be able to better offer services, sir, we made a commitment, sir. There were positions in there that we made sure that they were standardized as part of the government system, sir, to be able to better offer services to people. Brought a sense of calm in circumstances where people had a disquiet in their soul. Knowing that we were the government looking after the interests of persons, sir, who were treated as an underclass within customs. So this government brought settle to that. And most of the people who now work or are associated with the government, sir, or associated with the customs, have a sense now that things are going to get better. We also know, sir, that it takes sometimes a long time to be able to classify. Minister Strong and I were going through codes and different things and classifications, sir, but doing the detailed work that is necessary to be able to offer better services. And when Asikuda first started, a lot of people don't stay, but the reality is that when Asikuda first got on the way, it wasn't that the system was necessarily flawed or that the customs officers were getting it wrong. Asikuda, sir, is extremely sensitive to error. So that in the traditional system, where you could enter your data and make errors and still be allowed to go to the next level, in Asikuda you couldn't do that. So it meant that a lot of people who were using Asikuda, a lot of the brokers and so on, who might be entering data and then waiting to make corrections later, could not do so. So you had a lot of circumstances where things were taking longer because people were learning the system, but the system itself was not flawed. These same persons would tell you, because I speak to them all the time, these same persons would tell you that as it stands now, it is a lot more efficient and that we are delivering a lot faster than we were doing before Asikuda, sir. So that Asikuda has made a positive difference in the lives of people who are involved in that sector. And that, sir, is without a doubt. The other issue that we have, sir, because I don't want people to walk away thinking that we're only debating a law and that this thing has no soul. The other issue, sir, that we are debating, sir, and discussing in the port and in customs, sir, is this uncoordinated hours among the various agencies. The port opens at one time. Customs opens at another time. BRA, who receives the revenue, opens at another time. So there is a lack of coordination, sir, in the times. If you want to get efficient, sir, there's going to be a need, and we've started that conversation, to have a conversation with the persons who work in these various departments. And that we are already having that conversation, speaking to the officers in all these departments. But this is a union issue. Because you're now talking about people's hours of work, sir, whether it is written in stone or not. People have a legitimate expectation in certain circumstances, sir. So we're having a conversation with the unions to be able to offer a service in the port service so that we can say we are open at X time and everybody shows up to work, sir, at the time that we say we are open to business, sir. And that correcting these issues in my mind, sir, will lead to the kind of efficiencies that we want to have in a modern Barbados and in a modern Barbados Customs Department, sir. And I would say without a doubt that we are working to correct all these things. And it is going to be difficult if we are being serious, to discuss these things without looking at institutional strengthening. Our agencies, many of them, whether it is in the port, whether it's in customs, whether it is port health, immigration, sir, we have to strengthen the institutions to be able to better deliver to people of Barbados. And that in some circumstances, you need to import those skills because these skills don't necessarily reside in Barbados, and people don't like to hear it. But there's not every skill that we are going to need that resides here. Likewise, there are Barbadians elsewhere offering a skill that may not exist in other countries. That's the way of the world, sir. But that these are the things that we now have to be able to do. And I had a feeling, sir, I had a view that the Bridgetown port must become a place where it is friendly to do business and friendly for people to do business. You would recall either earlier this year or last, I think it was earlier this year, where there was some concern that people's goods were being tampered with, and people wanted to come back into the port to see their things. We said, okay, if that's how you feel, come back into the port and see the things that belong to you. Because I don't want you to walk away feeling that something is happening in the port. The amount of cameras and so on in the strategic areas in the port makes it difficult for us not to be able to see it now, though. So come back in and see the things that belong to you. But there's going to be a point, sir, where we have to, in the port, move that area from being inside the very heart and soul and belly of the port to still inside the port, but not in the secure area. So that we do not expose Barbados to risk, sir, because a modern port cannot have everybody going inside of it, sir. It's a security risk. And we're going to have to be able to change that. Sir, I also feel that in terms of transparency, for all of us, and I know the opposition leader, sir, would like to hear more about transparency. In terms of transparency for all of us, sir, we have to be able to make these things a lot more transparent. And by doing these things electronically, sir, by following the steps in the law that we will pass or hope to pass, sir, we make things a lot more transparent. It is going to be a lot more difficult for people to get away with things, sir, on the one hand, for aspersions to be cast on people's character. Well, they could still cast them, but they wouldn't be legitimate, sir, or the person could offer a defense. And offer some kind of transparency, sir, in the way that we do things, because you set out in systems. You know, there are systems, and the challenge is that if you allow the system to stay as it is, you can personalize these things. So that you walk into an agency, it happens not only in customs or in the port or anywhere, it happens in most places if you don't have systems. The way you walk into the agency today, you know, you got to ask who's at the desk, who you got to deal with today. Because if you deal with one person on a Monday, he's a nice fella. He can give you something like little ease, and he can do this and then. The next day you deal with another fella who may not be as nice. And he knows because he has free reign, no system, he then allows the own darkness in his spirit, sir, to manifest itself in his conversations with you and the way he treats you, because there are no systems. And that we are seeking, sir, to put in place systems to take out that kind of today one way and today another and tomorrow another kind of way. That kind of discretion, that wanton discretion, sir, that is dangerous. That is what, sir, I believe we are seeking to address. And, you know, borders cannot be fluid. You can't have these fluid borders, and it doesn't work like that. We need to have systems, sir. The customs department has to be clear. Port has to be clear. The security has to be clear, sir. And I feel, sir, that it gives the opportunity for honest men, sir, to not have their names called in things, sir, that are nefarious. That is why we are seeking to do some of these things as well. And I think we are lucky because most countries do not have the political will, many, to do what we are doing. Many countries are not tackling customs and immigration and the port and moving toward having FAL, the facilitation of maritime traffic. And we had, sir, in the last 10 years been so far behind. We were so far behind, Mr. Speaker, in terms of what we were offering at our port, in terms of what we were offering in our customs department. We were far behind. It is as if the world was moving ahead, sir, and Barbados felt that it could stay still, sir, and still stay in the race. It doesn't work like that. So that we are bringing a number of these things. You would see, sir, Customs bringing a new bill, a whole set of bills related to file. The Minister of Commerce will soon be bringing one on the single window. A lot of things are happening because we have to be able to better offer services. And it has nothing to do with trying to say somebody is corrupt or not corrupt. It is that we have to be able to offer better services to Barbadians, whether it is that they're seeking to import, whether it is that they're seeking to export. Sir, inefficiencies come at a cost, sir. If I have learned anything in the last few months, is that the supply chain that we rely on to be able to bring goods to Barbados, so we saw it twice when they had the block in the canal, and of course we saw it, and we are still seeing it with COVID. That these things, sir, little inefficiencies, sir, little disturbances come at a cost. These trickle-down costs, sir, and that these are cascading costs. So that you pay a cost, sir, and by the next step, it is that cost plus another cost, and the further step, these costs continue, sir. It is almost exponential in nature. And that therefore we have to be a lot more efficient in the way it is that we offer services, sir. The customs bill, sir, that is before this house, sir, would allow Barbados really and truly to begin to compete. Would allow Barbados, sir, to become a modern customs department. Sir, in the context of things, allows Barbados, sir, to build out a sector, sir, that was almost ignored. And it is sad because it is so critical to who we are, both in terms of efficiency, in terms of revenue generation, and clearly for us in terms of security. So these are the areas, sir, that I felt were very, very, very important. But unless, sir, we harmonize our policies, our procedures, our practices in the port, sir, in customs, it is going to be difficult for all of us. I also feel, and I've been speaking to the comptroller at our meetings on this, sir, that the idea of risk management is essential. You cannot have people who are trusted traders, people who are importers all the time, subject to the same conditions as somebody who now start importing, especially where you've gone through all of their documentation for all of this time. So it happens all over the world. In most places, sir, Barbados examines a higher percentage of that which is imported than most countries. A higher percentage. And my people might say that's good, but it's not really good because it means that you do not have in place a risk management system, sir, that you trust and one that works. Most customs departments, sir, have in place a risk management system. So that you see people coming in, sir, you've gone through their documents, they've been doing it for years. You know there are certain things you look for so that you could sample. We have to have better risk management there. And I know the comptroller, sir, is also of the view that we need to have better risk management. You know, so you might hear something get green lane, or in some cases not so green lane, depending on what it is. But there's still the examination that goes on. I must also say, sir, because I heard, you know, I heard some reference to it, sir. In the port, we have scanners and we have cameras that work. We have scanners and cameras that work. Was a time we did not have a lot of cameras, and the ones that were there did not work. We now have much more cameras, sir, and all of them work. We also have a scanner, sir, that all of the containers coming into Barbados, all of the containers coming into Barbados, all of them, sir, are scanned. In cases, sir, because you cannot always get everything in that major scanner, when we break it down, going into Shed 2, those things too are scanned. So that we are not taking chances if you get through, because, you know, if you hide it inside the larger container, you might be able to get away with it. But it's also scanned at a second scanner, sir. And it's not every incident that you find a little read in the port so that it's going to be in the paper. You will know that. And every time you find something, I mean, it's a security issue too. So it's not everything that you find you're going to talk about, but that there's a great degree of efficiency, sir, in the way that we have gone about our business. And in terms of being able to process data, sir, we're doing so faster and a lot better. I have a constituent, sir, and a friend who is of the view that right now we're charging a $30 fee, I think, Minister. I think it's $30, she tells me. that you have to do an entry for things $30 or more, and that maybe we should raise it to $100 to be able to make sure that these smaller things are not hindrances to the way we do business. I just think there's some practical things so that we have now to do to help people, so that customs does not become, and the port and everybody in that space, inefficient because we are trying to be efficient. There's some things under $30 may not be enough, maybe over $100 or so, then you do an entry. I just review some of these things that will make life easier on the small man. Because a man who's importing a pair of shoes for his child to wear to school or something, might not want to do an entry for those kind of things. Just to be able to review, we say in this party, sir, deconstruct, reconstruct. Just some of the simpler things and make life easier for people. Because I am positive in my mind, sir, that is why all of us in this room are sitting here. To be able to make life easier for people. And that the customs bill must be a tool that makes life easier for the people, sir, who live in this country. But there were a few things, sir, that I listened to the opposition leader, sir, and there were a few things, good points, but there are a few points, sir, that I feel that just raise in my mind a need to speak to some of them, sir. This idea that we are borrowing, and I am sure the minister in the Ministry of Finance will speak to this, sir. But it is difficult, and that we should grow, basically, be able to generate revenue through COVID and grow and do this is wishful thinking. But you are hard pressed. You are hard pressed in an environment that COVID is really, to find almost any country developing or developed that didn't have to borrow. Hard pressed. You are even more hard pressed, if you're being real, to find a tourism-based economy anywhere in the world, sir, that did not find itself in a situation where it didn't have to borrow. Now, it is okay to say that perhaps we should start to go into other areas, and we must. But the reality is that in the last 2 years of dealing with COVID, sir, where the main engine of revenue generation broke down all over the world, you are hard-pressed. I would be very impressed if I had an example, a real example, sir, because theory is theory, but theory is not the real world. And even the economic gurus of the world, sir, would tell you that in this environment, sir, people had to borrow money because they weren't raising revenue. The challenge is for me that were we under the last administration, they could not borrow money. It is not, the question isn't whether we borrowed or not. The question is whether they could have borrowed or not. And to be able to fill the hole, sir, that we needed to fill, sir, to be able to get through COVID, Barbados has to be the best place in the world for anybody to have had COVID, sir, in the last few years. Well, I know people who live in Europe who got COVID early and were told to stay home, only come to an institution if you're dying, pretty much. In New York, we saw people being pushed out like back in the day, sir, almost on pancake carts and thrown into the back of ice vans because the morgues were so full. This little country, sir, handled its business, and it handled it well. I understand people have to do what they have to do, sir, but it is a very wrong thing and misleading, sir, to leave the impression with anybody that we have been reckless, discharged our responsibilities without a sense of care or concern, which is the complete opposite, sir, of what we have done, sir. And so I understand that the economic model may be flawed, sir, but show me an economic model in these circumstances, sir, different from ours that worked. Show me. And if you show me, sir, I will believe. I know the opposition leader, sir, is a man of faith, sir, and you might refer to me as a doubting Thomas, but I must know in this circumstances see the hole in his hand. Because there is no economic model, sir, that I know of that worked in these circumstances, different from that, sir, which we are doing. The other point, sir, and is in relation to the customs officers, sir. I'm not trying to call them corrupt, sir. And make it sound as if then these innocent little customs officers, like fish in a pond, sir, are surrounded by these sharks, all of them corrupt. And that because the pond is so filled with sharks, sir, these little innocent customs officers may now find themselves, sir, fall into corruption. And you know, the words that were used, sir, was, you know, of that vein, like customs officers, because they, you know, especially when we go out. I must also tell you, sir, that the customs and the port is looking at a central examination facility that will be located at the port. It is in the the port's master plan. So very soon, instead of having to go off-site to be able to examine containers, those containers are going to be examined on-site, which reduces, and I'm sure that's your point, which reduces the likelihood of anything untoward occurring, sir. And I feel that the men and women in the customs department, for the most part, are people of tremendous integrity. And that even in the face of temptation, sir, most of them will not bow. That's my view. And I have a tremendous pride in the way, sir, that they have been able to discharge their responsibilities. And that I will continue to have such a pride in the way that they have been able to discharge their responsibilities, sir. And, you know, honest people in any circumstance, sir, will behave honestly. Honest people, sir, in any circumstance will behave honestly. I do not think, sir, that in treacherous circumstances, sir, where somebody is flashing a few dollars at a man, sir, that an honest man is going to fall for it. I don't. And I feel very strongly that most of the people who work in these departments are honest people and will not fall for it. And that's the difference, I believe, fundamentally, perhaps, in how we see this situation. And then, lastly, sir, the situation with the scanners, sir, very, very, very quickly, sir, and the cameras, sir, that we installed in the Bridgetown port, sir. It wasn't only in the Bridgetown port that we made such demands, you know. In the other areas where people import goods and are allowed to clear goods, sir, we've also asked them to, and they would tell you, that they had also to buy scanners. So all of them must also scan too. So that when you go to these facilities, sir, and they would tell you, because they've been saying how since we made them put in the scanners that it has slowed down their business, they would tell you that we made them, they had to buy scanners too. So that those major importers, sir, those major clearing areas, sir, also have scanners. And they've called me and they've said in certain times, it would be nice if the customs officers were not insisting that these goods be scanned when they are entering, but that allow them, because they're looking to move faster. They could stop some of the containers, stop some of the goods, and scan as they are leaving. But customs has insisted that they will scan them as they go in, which they say slow them down. So I know for a fact that it's not only in the Bridgetown port that there are scanners in other places too. And that those scanners are manned oftentimes by customs. What may be more true is that sometimes when it is time for scanning, they may say they don't have an officer. That may be true. And again, sir, that speaks to the fact that I feel we need to have more bodies, not less bodies in customs. So, sir, I just wanted to add that balance and that perspective, sir. I feel that this bill offers a value that we perhaps should not be allowed to miss. That I feel very strongly that this bill, even though it sounds like a customs bill and finance and revenue and efficiency and so on, is really about people and people's capacity to be able to live a decent life in this country, to facilitate trade faster, to make things less costly. Right now, a container, sir, because of the way the world has been moving, right now a container has gone up in cost astronomically because of COVID. So that the delays in the supply chain meant that there were actually less containers available than there were goods. So containers then became a business almost in themselves. Very, very difficult to be able to get a container. And when you do get it, sir, you have to be able to pay more for it. People are not even giving you containers now because of the demurrage charges and so on too. Everything now is a lot more expensive than it used to be. The fact that we are able to move faster, the fact that we're able to be consistent, sir, because certainty in the port, certainty in customs, and certainty in our systems will mean something, will make it a lot easier for people to get access to their goods. and it will make those goods, sir, a lot less costly to people. And at the end of the day, sir, we are doing all this for people. So, sir, I wish to lend my unequivocal support, of course, to the bill. I want to thank the Honourable Minister in the Ministry of Finance for bringing the bill, sir. And I am confident, sir, that this bill would add value to the lives of ordinary people in this country, sir. With those few words, sir, I thank you.
Honourable Member for St. James Central.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I too would like to just encroach on your forbearance to share a few thoughts and offer another perspective on this matter. I was not minded to do so, Mr. Speaker, sir, and indeed for much of the delivery of the Leader of the Opposition, I remained content that I would not do so, except for the fact that he happened to harp upon the terms growth and competitiveness. And to focus more specifically, Mr. Speaker, sir, the question of competitiveness. And as the Honourable Member elaborated, it became clear to me that there was perhaps a need for an intervention which sought to right the ship in the water. Because, sir, it is clear that we are dealing with a customs bill, and I think it should be clear to all who are within earshot, and indeed all who would use their imagination, that a simple customs bill will not and cannot by itself address all of the nation's woes with respect to growth and challenges associated therewith, nor for that matter, Mr. Speaker, sir, could it by itself alone, standing alone as a piece of legislation, address all of the nation's challenges with respect to competitiveness. And I think we have to recognize, first of all, sir, that there's much that this government has done that perhaps falls easily within the context of maintaining and improving our levels of competitiveness that are perhaps so simple and so straightforward that many, including, unfortunately, the Leader of Her Majesty's Opposition, take it for granted. I give you a few examples, Mr. Speaker, sir. When we are talking about the water mains replacement and this government's commitment to rectifying what has been, in some cases, as much as 100 years of neglect, sir, we are putting the country, by way of the preservation of our people's access to water, our industry's access to water, into circumstances where we are collectively more competitive. The simple, and that is perhaps a larger picture. The simple act, as was done a couple of days ago, sir, of extending a curfew from whatever time it was, 9 in the night, back to 12, rolling it backwards, sir, enables people in the services sector, in particular in the entertainment industry, to become a little bit more competitive. And I say that, Mr. Speaker, sir, in fact, even as I speak, I reflect on the cleanup of ash done immediately after an ash fall, but necessarily so in order to get business back to work, schools to reopen, et cetera, again, in the interest of competitiveness. And I don't want a red herring to be drawn across the trail in a debate as fundamental as this on the issue of competitiveness, because if there's one thing that this government should and could not properly be charged with, is dereliction of duty with respect to this nation's competitiveness. In every single sphere of endeavor that the Cabinet's ministries focus on, sir, there has been at the core of our work getting the competitiveness levels of Barbados up. Now, sir, the Leader of the Opposition spent great time, and I think he was very well responded to by the Honourable Member for St. Michael's South, who just took his seat. And I will not belabor much of the points made by him. I think that the Honourable Member for St. Michael's South pointed us in the direction that we all need to look when he said that the port has to be a friendly place to do business. And in this very brief intervention, sir, I want to focus on that part of the bill, which will take us through what is perhaps, again, one of the keenest areas of the likelihood of our increasing this nation's competitiveness in business as it impacts or as it flows naturally through the work of customs. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, the question before us really is easily contextualized. This bill is necessary because customs, sir, is an engine for inclusive growth, and it is an engine, sir, for the ultimate reduction of poverty in any country. It is also, sir, an engine for national security, or a gateway for national security considerations, and by extension, it must be a business facilitating entity. I don't think that anybody in Barbados could say that that is not what customs in Barbados has historically been, and that is what it is today. We want to make it sharper, we want it to make it more nimble, we want to make it better equipped to meet those criteria that I just outlined. And Mr. Speaker, sir, speaking as a minister responsible for a substantial component of this country's business interests, I must say that the business facilitation aspect of this debate cannot be allowed to go unnoticed. We had a challenge when we came into government in 2018, sir. If I was asked to articulate the nature of that challenge, it would have been, sir, I would have to say that we were challenged to ensure that we could enhance and improve on the efficiency of the way in which we conducted trade, especially trade across borders. What, for the purposes of cabinet, is called either international trade or in some cases simply international business. Though there is a very slender distinction between the two, there is a distinction. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, the challenge of that was that there's a need to facilitate, obviously, trade across borders. We want, in simple terms, because I think the member for St. Michael South quite rightly said that this debate has to have a soul. And perhaps the time has come that it gets that soul. And I don't say that in any way to disparage the honourable members who have spoken before. But let us make this about the nuts and bolts of the country, the way people eat, the way people live, Mr. Speaker, sir. You have constituents who have small businesses. You do. I see you nod your head in agreement. And Mr. Speaker, sir, those constituents, when they have done the things that they need to do in order to sell, want to be able to get that which they sell over to Trinidad, or into Dominica, or St. Lucia, Mr. Speaker. Equally, when they are trying to put together the things that they want to sell, they have to make their imports. And the imports coming in from over and away. Those imports, Mr. Speaker, sir, coming through customs, though. So that there is, in a real sense, on a day-by-day basis, there is a need to ensure that we get outside of the ambit, the rarefied air of talking about competitiveness of economies and so on, when it is really about making sure that the little company I got, the little small firm, my endeavor, whatever it is, I might be reselling cars. But what I bring into Barbados, sir, I want to make sure I could get in a timely manner, that I could get through customs in a timely manner, that I would, sir, go through all the other things, and I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this thing called an electronic single window. Because it tells me that despite what I believe is a genuine effort to make a serious response, the leader of the opposition is in deep waters on some of these matters. Conceptually, he started to contradict himself. And it begins with an understanding, I think, sir, respectfully, of what it is when we speak about trade facilitation. Let's start there. Forgive me if I sound as though I'm lecturing, sir, but I spent a little bit of time doing this in law, and it now becomes a little bit of second nature to me. I want to say, Mr. Speaker, sir, that if you're talking about trade facilitation, it really has a threefold meaning. You are first of all talking about simplifying trade-related procedures. You can't simplify the procedures, sir, unless we remove from the processes some of the things that are superfluous, some of the things that overlap and repeat themselves. And in Barbados, in 2018, we had a problem which we had for all of our previous existence. Fact of the matter is we talked around the problem. We talked about the problem, but we did little to fix the problem. And what is some of the overlapping? That if I am an importer. And I got a shop. So I want to bring in things, Mr. Speaker, sir. Well, maybe not a shop, because very often they can go through a distributor. So let's go to the bigger party, the person doing most of the importing, the distributor themselves. But Mr. Speaker, sir, they have to go through a number of different stops along the way. It didn't just like come through customs and I can get it. Because very often it involves, depending on what I'm bringing in, I may have to go through the police force. I might go through the defense force. Depending on what I'm bringing in, Mr. Speaker, I got to go through government plant quarantine. Depending on what I'm bringing in, I got to go through the drug service, etc., etc. And Mr. Speaker, sir, the question is, at every stop, at every contact point, a little bit of time is spent. Very often you're doing it physically, so a little bit of time is spent getting from one office to another. And at every contact point, there's a set of rules that I got to fill out or follow, and a set of documents that I got to follow and fill out. And Mr. Speaker, sir, all of those things equate to one thing that you and I understand well as persons who've had to run our own business, and that is that time is money. What we were doing is asking business people to spend a lot of time at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 contact points or more. And every time they do that, they're taking up a little bit more money out of the pocket. And the knock-on effect is, because I won't recover, I'm not in it for a loss. I'm not in it for charity. So to make sure that I can be properly compensated, you know who pays, Mr. Speaker, sir? Your constituent and mine, because they're the ultimate end result. They're the consumer at the back, at the end of the line. Mr. Speaker, sir, the other trade facilitation concept is standardization, which is really creating a standard reference code. Standard reference code, or a standard way of identifying one product wherever it is, however it is described. There is one set of description for it. Customs has done that exceptionally well. And then the third one, Mr. Speaker, sir, is harmonizing your processes with international standards and international best practices. And that is where we are today. And that is largely what brings us here with this bill, Mr. Speaker, sir. The first one that I spoke about and the last one I spoke about clearly require two things. The need for us to have digitized documentation and digitize your access to the process. And then after that, Mr. Speaker, sir, after the digitization, you want to have a coordinated strategy to manage your border. Now, sir, it is not a difficult thing to understand. It should not be a matter that taxes the leader of the opposition and causes him to go wide into a variety of other things. The truth of the matter is that if we're going to be frank with ourselves, I mean, let me just say again, personal experience. I went into cabinet in 2003. When I was in the Ministry of Foreign Trade in 2005, I was first introduced at a CARICOM ministerial meeting to this concept of an electronic single window. At that time, it was mooted by the UN as a best practice that we should be following. In 2005, Mr. Speaker, sir, 16 long years ago. And the fact of the matter is, sir, that concept was a single space facilitating access to multiple stakeholders. We heard the Minister of Finance speaking about that today. And multiple investors and stakeholders would interface on this space. And most importantly, government's regulatory agencies would be in the space as well. The issue for us, Mr. Speaker, sir, was to deal with the mischief that we were hoping to correct. Between 2005 and today, that mischief was not corrected. And what is the mischief that we're talking about? And I want to pause here because, as I said, we're giving it a little bit of soul. And to do that, you got to understand what the people went through. The people elected to change the government in 2007. At the end of 2007, started 2008. So between then and 2018, when the last administration was in place, what happened? The fact of the matter is, sir, that in spite of this concept being there from 2005, in spite of our competitors, especially those in Asia, and we like to stand askance and view with awe the performance of Singapore. Well, Mr. Speaker, sir, they had their electronic single window in place around 2010. South Korea around 2012. Mr. Speaker, sir, all through Asia, you look at the so-called tigers, they had their electronic single window in place. Why? Again, sir, because it spurs competitiveness. You are using technology that was always readily available since 2000 and somebody. The digitization was there, sir. You are digitizing the process so that you do not, by going to customs or going to the police and then leaving there and say, well, okay, I got my permission from these people to bring in this, so then I go into the next people. Or if the next step is not the police, it might well be the plant quarantine. Let's make it something that is more average to the average Barbadian. And you come out of plant quarantine, then you have somewhere else that you have to stop again. So the electronic single window that we have, and let me just say, because people may forget, we just had United Nations Conference on Trade and Development held here in Barbados. The General Secretary of UNCTAD, the Secretary General of UNCTAD, and myself signed the commencement of Barbados's participation in this single window process. They are building out the single window for us as the consultant over a period of the next 20-somebody months, 30 months at the outer limit. I beg them to go a little faster. But the fact of the matter is, Mr. Speaker, sir, we are onboarding 26 agencies, 26 government departments. I'm not joking when I say to you that and I described it at the launching ceremony as a nauseating experience for the average Barbadian. Because we go from pillar to post. One businessman that got to find his way through commerce, the Ministry of Commerce. He got to go to the National Standards Institute. He has to go, Mr. Speaker, so as I say, sometimes to the drug service. He got to go through customs, as we know. You got to go through port health. You got to go through the Ministry of Agriculture, plant quarantine. You have regulatory agency after regulatory agency, Mr. Speaker, sir. And at every stage along the way, that business person is physically finding himself at somebody else's office to go through another set of documentation, another set of procedures. Some bear no relevance to the one before or the ones before. And each one, Mr. Speaker, sir, stands independently in its own domain. You may have had 7 to go through in your particular process, but the 7th man said, well, I am satisfied, so everything go away here till when I am satisfied. And we can't go on that way. And that's what it's about. And that's the mischief that we failed to correct from 2008 until now. Well, Mr. Speaker, sir, it is understandable, therefore, why the Minister of Finance must feel a certain sense of pride to be able to be here today to do that which he has just done. Because he is lifting the average Barbadian business person out of a mess, a regulatory mess that existed. And Mr. Speaker, the bureaucratic red tape was stifling the business community of this country. No, that is the mischief that we had to correct. I ain't done there yet though, because volumes of information and documentation are required at every one of those steps. And in every time I got to be going through the documentation, sir, as I said, I paying somebody to do it, or alternatively doing it myself. And as you know, sir, if you cannot be practicing law, but you have to be filling out forms that taking up the time that you should be looking after your clients, then, sir, it is a distraction you can do without. And somebody should be paying you for your time because you bill your client according to the time that you can spend on their file. And that, Mr. Speaker, sir, is the headache that we've been putting people through. So the requirements of satisfying each of these agencies' own requirements became overbearing. And collectively, Mr. Speaker, sir, the compliance costs to the importer and to the exporter have driven the cost of business up in this country. And the people who suffer as a result of that are our consumers. That's why the Honourable Member for St. Michael South is right when he talks about giving it a soul. Because the politics in this is that we are making now the circumstances such that the cost of living in Barbados cannot justifiably continue to be increased if you are making the process faster, more transparent, more easy, and therefore it should also be less costly. That is what this is really about, Mr. Speaker, sir. The concept of a single window needs to be explained also, I think, because if at the level of Her Majesty's leadership of the opposition, there is a misappreciation of what we are talking about, the significance of what we're talking about, then I suspect that in the Paynes Bay market in my constituency, there may be a similar misappreciation. Though I have come to find out from time to time that those folks are a lot sharper than you may wish to give credit for, sir. And the single window intended, or as is intended, is really, sir, a federation, if you will, of all government administrated and all government regulatory agencies at one place in one space. How is that possible? It is possible because we do it on a digitized platform. Mr. Speaker, sir, the advantage is that they interface with each other at any given time, and that there is a single entry point for every person who is seeking to conduct business in Barbados. Whether that person is an importer of something or whether that person is an exporter of something, the facilitation that they get is an ease of passage through the regulatory agencies so that the requirements of the regulatory agencies can be assessed by the agencies themselves. There can be a don't want to say cross-fertilization, but a cross-referencing is the word I'm looking at. If Customs has some view about what agriculture or the Ministry of Commerce concerns are, Customs can go on to the space, find out what it is that the Ministry of Commerce had to say about the matter. There can be a cross-referencing in the interest of expediting this process. A file no longer has to be put in a messenger's hand for a messenger to get an available motor car. If he is not at work this week for whatever reason, he won't have to wait until next week for it to move from Commerce to the Ministry of Finance or to the Ministry of Agriculture or wherever else. For that file to work its way through the registry of the receiving entity, to spend a couple of days on the desk of the person because it ain't get to the top of the pile yet, and then be dealt with 3 weeks later. That, Mr. Speaker, sir, in 2019-18 when we came to government, is how business was being done in this country. Let's talk about the soul, because the soul in this, sir, is the fact that the people who we represent, the business people who are trying to employ some of our constituents, the business people, sir, who are trying to build a culture of entrepreneurship in Barbados, these people were being asked to suffer the indignities, sir, of some process taken in some cases, and I kid you not, in some cases 3 and 4 months to go through a system, when the system, Mr. Speaker, sir, could be dealt with in 3 hours. And nobody wants to talk about that. Nobody wants to come to the root of why things in Barbados are sometimes so expensive. Nobody wants to talk about why things in Barbados are sometimes so inefficient. Nobody wants to come to the root of why things in Barbados are so frustrating. And again, you say, as the honourable member for Christchurch, East Central would have pointed out, customs, breadfruits hang low. My customs got my thing hold up. As though it begins and ends with customs. I have taken, and Mr. Speaker, it's the same thing that happens in the Ministry of Energy, And that's why we are doing the same thing over there, creating a space electronically for people who are applicants for renewable energy to come into the system at one place, because right now they can enter through the government electrical engineering department. And if a fellow goes to apply for a license over a government electrical engineering department, how do I, as Minister of Energy, know? How does my permanent secretary know? But he gonna do what he had to do over there. He may have gone to Light and Power first to find out if you got room on the line to connect my plan. I plan to put in how much ever kilowatts or megawatts. You got room for me? And the fellow said, man, we should be all right. I can check it for you. And as far as he's concerned, he began his process. But 4 months later, it has not yet come to the Ministry of Energy. And they will say, Mama, the government taking too long. Fact of the matter is, the process is what is failing the people. And so we got to fix that. And Mr. Speaker, sir, I'm happy to say that while we are dealing with that, this particular issue here is now at the stage where I think we can look at it now and feel a sense of pride that we have corrected a wrong that has historically existed in Barbados, that had its solutions offered to the government of Barbados in 2005, but it took, unfortunately, sir, until today for it to see the light of day in the Parliament of Barbados. Mr. Speaker, sir, the benefits are plenty. You are simplifying the information flow. And I think I've made that point very clear. Mr. Speaker, the government can better facilitate trade. And I think I've made that clear as well. There is another point that I haven't spoken to, and that is that relevant data can now be captured. It enables customs to be able to have a better grasp, immediate grasp, electronically filed grasp on some of the information that customs needs to have. And without wanting to stir up a hornet's nest in this place, I think that the Minister of Finance would agree with me that there are entities that import things into Barbados from places overseas, where those entities, perhaps I should say, can warehouse some of the things that they import. Because those entities are sufficiently large, they do not only service this island, but they may service wide swaths of the Caribbean. And Mr. Speaker, so when you're buying at that scale, you're very able to buy a unit price way below that which might otherwise you might expect. And Mr. Speaker, sir, customs needs to have a better grasp on these things so that customs is in a better position to do the monitoring that has to take place, so that when the unit of whatever it is arrives on our shores, we have a better feel for what the true value of the transaction should be. If we can't do these things, then, Mr. Speaker, sir, our people will continually be being asked to pay pounds for a penny's worth. And that can't work. So the relevant data capture is important. And, Mr. Speaker, sir, there has to be provision also for the data sharing, which is inherently built into the single window concept. It is, sir, a operation which will be led by the Ministry of Commerce, and Commerce is going to ensure that the participating authorities and agencies coordinate the controls and the information flows. But again, another important part of this is ease of payment. Very important for the Ministry of Finance, very, very important for the country. And that ease of payment, sir, in the single window process allows for the duties, the taxes, the fees, etc., to be paid through the portal created. And collectively, therefore, so it works to our advantage. I want to say that in other parts of the world where there has been an electronic single window, and I've used the Asian examples, the efficiency of business, sir, has increased, sir, in terms of the visible reduction in cost by as much as 15% in some cases. And I just want you to picture what efficiency, building efficiency into a system like this can do. Because if it can bring down costs in parts of Asia by 15% and 14% and so on, sir, then the same thing could happen here. We're driving costs down. And I hear the leader of the opposition about what then happens with employment. And I take his point. It is one of the very important aspects of this whole process, because he's 100% right in my judgment when then we have now to think in terms of how we retrain people and we retool their skill sets so that they are in a position to fit into other areas. the economy does not just stagnate, or should not ever. We went through that period in 2008 to 2018. I don't want us to go back there again. But Mr. Speaker, sir, to make sure we don't go back there again, we got to make sure that we are constantly reskilling people so that there are new things that come on stream and people are being trained for those things. It ain't to say that because there's a digitalized platform here that ain't nothing for somebody to do. We are, and you know, it amazes me, sir, it amazes me that a person can reach the lofty heights of constitutional office in this country and be bankrupt of understanding. We are, sir, we are, as I speak to you, digitizing records. We are digitizing records in ministries all around Barbados. Work is being done contractually by people who otherwise were on a payroll that the government could not maintain payment for. The weight of the payroll was breaking the back of the Ministry of Finance, Mr. Speaker, sir. So those people having been taken off, brought back on under specified contract to say for the certain period of time, this day to the next day, this is what you are expected to do. The value of this task is XYZ. This is what we're going to pay you. The people have the skill sets to do the work within the time they are being paid. Perhaps in a better situation than they were in before because they have the flexibility of doing that and doing something else. The same way you don't only work for one client at a time, Mr. Speaker, sir. You work for 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 15 or more. I heard Queen's Counsel for Christchurch South, the Honourable Member of Christchurch South, Mr. Thorne, behind me, saying 30, but that is him. He's at that level.
He will only say that in here, not outside.
Well, yes.
He can only say that in here, not
yes,
outside.
You know how it is. You know how it is. He hired up, sir, hired up and bettered off. But, Mr. Speaker, sir, the point I'm making is that you know, we have to be realistic about the opportunities that are out there. And it isn't to say that this is the case of, oh, woe is me. It is an opportunity of us looking at this thing, encouraging our people to constantly retrain. I think that, and let me just say in passing, that is something that we should all be doing. If COVID has taught us anything, it is that all of us are very temporary, and there are a number of jobs and tasks which are being done now that were unheard of before COVID. There are a number of tasks, sir.
I remember has 2 more minutes.
There are a number of tasks, sir, that are done now, that are done in a digitized way that was unthought of before COVID. Mr. Speaker, said there are businesses that are globally successful and making multiple millions of dollars that virtually nobody didn't even know about before COVID. Fact of the matter is, sir, that this is a new world, and our people must be urged to fit in and facilitated and trained, and we got to hold the hand and carry them as they face these challenges, sir. And that is a story for another time. But the reality is, sir, that the benefit of this is obviously in cost and time reduction and the sharing of information, sir. And I want to close on this point. The sharing of information is something critically important for customs. Customs is engaged, sir, in risk analysis. I think this customs, sir, this customs department does more risk analysis now than ever before. I remember when it was an international transport minister, sir, and the airport, that was what we were hearing day after day. We need to do more risk analysis. We need to look at the risk of this. We need to look at the risk of that. Mr. Speaker, sir, Customs now is doing risk analysis in a very serious way, and it helps them with their risk management, sir, and therefore it helps us as a country have better security. And you have to understand what I mean. Again, let's give it a little soul. If you coming in through the airport and you bring in the whole focus of customs to see if you could catch a white man with a golf bag that might got in, again, Mr. Speaker, sir, how many golf bags, and again, you're going to see coming through the airport every day? How many? You may find one every 3 months or 4 months. So what is the risk involved? Compare that, sir, to another risk that you might have, where there is a substantially greater need for customs to be paying closer and more acute attention. And therefore, sir, it is that management of risk that we're talking about. Well, isn't it different to how we've treated the question of COVID? You look at the risk of the situation and you shape the policy accordingly. And therefore, sir, I think that it is absolutely critical that we continue down the path that we're going, which is to allow for enhanced risk analysis on the part of the border control agencies, improving their risk management ability, which, as I said, has been improved tremendously over the course of the last couple of years, using the technology which is available to support that, Mr. Speaker, sir, and we come away as a country with a better secure environment, better deployment of our resources, better management of the human resources, and the skill sets which we have at our disposal. So for all of those very good reasons, sir, I want to support this bill. I'm sorry that the Leader of the Opposition did not make himself available for the bit of pupillage, but there'll be other opportunities, sir. I am always open to assist him in any way I can to help him be able to execute the office which he now holds, and for his sake, I hope he will continue to hold for as long as possible. I am obliged to you, sir.
Honourable St. James South.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. I have to say that I have thoroughly enjoyed the presentations today because this bill, as the Honourable Member for St. James Central said, it speaks about customs and sounds as though it could be dry. But the truth is, it is a game changer for the economy of Barbados. And therefore, I wanted to be able to stand and offer my deepest thanks, gratitude, congratulations to the Honourable Minister, the representative for Christchurch East Central. I want to be able to say a big thank you to the Controller of Customs and his team, to say a big thank you to the consultant from UNCTAD who has worked with our port, with our customs, to help us get to a stage where we've been able to put in all the necessary things that are an integral part of the transformation of the Barbadian economy, because that is what it is. I have waited for this day, and I am so pleased this afternoon to be able to stand and to say thank you for this, because I know what it will mean to the lives of every Barbadian and what it will mean to our business. How is this going to help us to be successful in our trade strategy? Barbados for a long time has been dependent on tourism, and we've been dependent on financial services. The diversification of our economy has been critical to our being able to create a level of stability in our economic fortunes. We've heard the term many times, and for many years when this party was in government the last time, many efforts were made to start planting new sectors. When we came into office, we recognized that we needed to continue that journey. And the transformation of customs as one of the first orders of business for this administration was important to the success of that strategy. And what is it? Well, we depend heavily on the tourism and international services in the area of the export of our goods. Barbados has a narrow set of goods. Over the last 15 years, Barbados has not been able to transform its top 10 exports. They are the same as they were 15 years in front, because we've not been able to bring the necessary development to the manufacture of goods and to be able to export them. In addition to having a narrow band of goods, we sell those goods into a narrow set of markets. And what this does, it makes Barbados highly vulnerable to any changes in the market. Economic recession in the market that we're exporting to can topple us. A problem with any one of the products that we sell will topple us. And therefore, there's a fragility to the Barbadian economy that puts every single Barbadian at risk, including those of us who work for substantial salaries, who have been working with organizations for years, or who work in government for years. That type of vulnerability puts every Barbadian life at risk. So what is it this government has sought to pursue? as a result of the need to diversify the economy, and how does the customs team make such a tremendous difference and is such a game changer. Barbados has recognized that if we're going to diversify our trade, we have to look for new partners. It means adding other trade partners to the existing ones. And so Barbados has sought to pursue a South-South strategy where we're seeking to reach out to other countries, other developing countries like ours, to find the opportunities that we need to be able to develop mutually beneficial trading relationships. And so Barbados is looking to Africa. Barbados is looking to Latin America. Barbados is looking to CARICOM to rejuvenate the CARICOM trade, to make more of our Latin American trade, and to start a robust, aggressive trade program with Africa. Even just today, I completed some discussions with Ghana to be able to start talking about what is it we can do in relation to trade that will help Barbados over the near future. Now, how can Barbados benefit from that South-South trade? One of the things you would have heard articulated is that we wanted to establish a free zone where you're going to be able to set up businesses that will be able to do some serious trade. Barbados' intention is to be a major transshipment point between Africa and Latin America. Now, Africa is interested not just in its cousins in CARICOM, not just in the diaspora who belong to their family, but they're interested in the whole of Latin America as a potential place where they can trade, because Africa is on the move. Africa has been changing its entire economic profile. Its GDP has shifted from just consumption to 50% of the GDP reflecting investment. Hundreds and hundreds of investors are seeking opportunities in Africa, and Africa is making sure that it is ready to be able to export across the world. And Barbados has the opportunity to be a major transshipment point that will enable Africa to engage Latin America. And it means that if we're going to make that happen, we have got to do trade facilitation right. And this is where your port comes in. It has to be the most efficient, technologically advanced. It has to have its own team hygiene, where we constantly review what we are doing and constantly refresh it and add more and more so that we are able to be competitive in being able to provide services within a free zone. And what will that mean? If we've listened carefully to the presentations today from the Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central, St. James Central, and from St. Michael South, you will recognize that they've all shared that it will benefit the average Barbadian. They've spoken about how it will enable trade and allow people to be able to do trade in such an efficient manner that they're going to be able to control costs and therefore be more competitive. And that is going to help the consumer. But it's going to do something even more. It is going to broaden the scope of jobs that are going to be available to Barbadians. Because if we're able to build out a free zone, that free zone can end up employing tens of thousands of Barbadians if necessary. We don't have enough population. We have to sort out that problem, Mr. Speaker. But that free zone is going to provide an opportunity for Barbadians to be able to work with businesses that conduct business in that space. In addition, it's going to help us to build out our maritime industry, to be able to identify the types of jobs, because obviously if you've got a transshipment point and you have all these ships, there are going to be services that are going to be needed. And so Barbadians now need to be trained in some of the marine jobs that will enable them to be able to service these ships as they come in, because they're going to be moving cargo and we want to be a serious transshipment point. Now, what can that look like? We are really at the baby stage. We are at the first step. We are creating the efficiencies. We then have to develop a growth path. And where do we want to grow to? Singapore is probably one of the best transshipment points in the world. And in Barbados, right now, we move just over 100,000 containers per annum. Singapore actually moves 100,000 containers a week. Within a year, they can move close to 36 million containers. And Singapore is just a little bit bigger than Barbados. That is who we can be when we grow up. That is where we can go as we go down the road. This is the path and direction that we want to be able to take our economy. And the key that is central to this is customs or port. And so the work that you're doing, you're laying a foundation for prosperity for Barbadians that will enable our children to look forward to jobs that can pay them well, that our children can dream again and not have to fly from our shores because we have no jobs to offer them. All of us have that challenge in our constituency. I have a constituency that has a lot of university graduates, and all you're hearing is, I'm going to have to leave here to go and get a job. This is what we want to fix, and you are creating that opportunity through you, Mr. Speaker, to the customs. You're helping to create that opportunity for more jobs and enable dreaming among our young people again. That's why what you're doing is so important. But it's not only helping us to make a success of our South-South trade by creating a free zone. Barbados has trade agreements with a number of countries around the world. We have a European Union Economic Partnership Agreement that is supposed to assist us with being able to trade in goods and services into the European market that we need to be able to take advantage of. We have one with the UK. We negotiated that one just about a year or so ago. When Brexit occurred, it was necessary to quickly put together the British Economic Partnership Agreement so that we did not miss a beat in terms of trade when Britain left. And Mr. Speaker, all of those agreements have trade facilitation requirements, that there is a single point at which you can get information and transact business, that there's certainty in the process, that there is ease of getting the information that you need to plan your business as an exporter or as an importer. They have specific requirements that we must meet in order to fulfill our part of those trade agreements. Now, the truth is, Mr. Speaker, when the Minister of Foreign Affairs signs an agreement like that, or when I have to sign an agreement on behalf of the country to put that trade agreement in place, it is only paper. Because at the end of the day, when people start to ask questions, can we do business with Barbados? One of the first things they want to know, what is the ease of doing business in that country? How long does it take to get your goods through the port? What are the costs of business? What is the ease of registering a business? If you have a case or you have a dispute, how quickly can you get it through the court system? These are the things people ask. And based on the answers to those questions, it determines whether they're going to bring their business here. Now, the unfortunate thing is, if you don't know that people have been inquiring and after they receive answers they decided not to come, you are not aware of the lost opportunities that would have occurred. You don't know that you have lost the opportunity to create another 3,000 jobs because we are not aware that people have made the inquiry and have asked, what is it like to do business in Barbados? So therefore I say to you, through you, Mr. Speaker, that the quality that you bring to your job is important to the future of this nation. That in the Customs Department must be the very best of Bajan excellence. that in the Customs Department must be some of the most highly trained individuals, and that the management, the daily management of tasks, the daily management of people, ensuring standards and monitoring the consistency of how we perform our jobs is critical to the success of Barbados being able to establish a free zone, that as we succeed in it, we could be the Singapore of the West Indies. That is what is at stake. That is a job we are asking of you. And this is why it is important. And sir, I'm not going to detain the chamber long. Much has been said, and we have touched on a number of things. I just have two more things that I want to be able to share. We are part of a CARICOM body, a CARICOM family, in which we've made an agreement about how we're going to treat our goods, in which we've made an agreement in how we're going to share our resources and how we're going to cooperate to make it easier for tiny nations like ours to be able to make its way in a world where other countries who are bigger and more powerful and have more resources than we do, how we are going to engage them and try to extract from the world order the very best deal for Barbados, to be able to negotiate the terms and the conditions that are necessary to make it possible for us to trade and create jobs and to provide social services for our people. And honoring the terms and conditions of the agreement are important, because people have to be able to trust that when we say we are going to do X, that X is going to be done and will be done on time. And as the minister in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, with responsibility for foreign trade, I'm responsible for representation at COTED. And COTED is the body that works on the elements of trade and the relations between the countries of CARICOM. And when we pledge that the common external tariff is X, and we make an agreement to raise the tariff because we've identified a business within the community that needs some protection, so that that particular country can grow that particular industry and provide jobs for their people, our customs, they are the gatekeepers that ensures that when those goods come in, that tariff is applied as it should be. That when COTED makes a decision for a suspension on a tariff, because good and sufficient reason was put before us as foreign trade ministers as to why we should suspend the common external tariff for a specified period of time, it is necessary for customs to monitor and ensure that it is instituted at the time that it is agreed and that it is properly terminated when the time has expired, and that we honor all of our obligations. If we fail in that duty of monitoring, if we fail in that duty of protecting the tariff, what it means is that we would not be playing our part in ensuring that other economies within the region, including our own, have the best chance to grow. If our neighbors cannot trust us to apply that tariff as it should be, or take off the tariff as it should be, then we are going to have issues when we try to get our goods into them. And why is it beneficial to us if regional production grows? It is beneficial to us because, Mr. Speaker, when Barbados makes product, somebody has to buy it. And right now, we trade more with the OECS and with CARICOM than with any other partner outside of what we do in financial services and tourism. We need CARICOM. CARICOM is important to the survival of Barbados. And if the people of CARICOM do not have enterprises that are able to earn because they can sell their goods to the CARICOM market, then the people in that country will not have the disposable income to purchase the goods that we sell to them. They have to flourish and thrive in order for us to flourish and thrive. And this is why honoring our common external tariff, honoring our rules of origin agreements are very important for the trust and the certainty and the consistency that is needed to enable trade among us. Now, you may already know that we're looking to carry forward our thrust into CARICOM. And part of that has to do with the review of the common external tariff. What changes do we need to make to that tariff and how we use it in order to encourage more regional production? Mr. Speaker, with the best will in the world, there is no enterprise that can sell into a Barbadian market of 300,000 people and make money without simply increasing the cost to the consumer without adding any value. And what that does, it destroys the welfare of the consumer. That the consumer is paying more and more for the same good, the same service, and therefore having less disposable income to take care of their families. So how do you change that? By encouraging trade, by encouraging our enterprises to go out and establish themselves in the markets around CARICOM. They're able to increase the amount of units that they actually produce and sell them at a lower price and still make money. What does that do? Creates Barbadian jobs and makes life easier for the Barbadian consumer. That is what we do when we facilitate trade, when we honor the CARICOM agreement and make sure that its elements are properly implemented so that we're able to create prosperity around the region. This is what you do. So I want to urge something, Mr. Speaker. A few months ago, the Honourable Member of St. Michael Northeast had started to share with the country that one of the goals of this administration is to be able to find meaningful ways to be able to incentivize our civil service so that they always give of their best. That they're able to find ways to benefit from when they create the conditions for prosperity for the nation. That work should not go unrecognized. And I want to urge that this is something that we must begin to fast track. That as we are seeking to transform organization by organization, unit by unit, critical to the well-being of Barbados, that we find meaningful ways to incentivize the team so that they participate in the prosperity they create, but also that they are acknowledged and recognized for the prosperity which they bring. Because at the end of the day, they're a critical part of what enables every Barbadian to have the opportunity to live a good life. My generation lived a good life. The current generation that was here with us this morning, Mr. Speaker, their life is going to be more challenging because we are in more challenging times. So it means that we have to transform, not just for our own sake, but for the sake of our children, that we are able to find a way for Barbados to craft economic prosperity that will allow those children to dream, to grow, and to see come to pass the things that they desire to do with their lives. This is the promise that we want to make to the next generation. And I want again to thank you, through you, Mr. Speaker, the team from Customs, their leader, their minister. I want to thank you sincerely for this work. And hard as it will be, because it's not going to be easy, I want to ask you to continue to persevere, to show Barbadian excellence in getting us to the tape, that we can deliver on the promise to Barbadians, that we will provide them with a better life for our people. I'm obliged to you, Mr. Speaker.
I remember for St. Philip North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just a few words as always. I am coming to discuss with the public, maybe from a different angle. Being the simple mind that I am, as the Honourable Member for St. James Central said, maybe I'm bankrupt in understanding. But searching myself, the first thing I think of, and indeed my constituents, I had a short poll that I thought of when I hear the word customs, is fees and how hard it is for the average man to bring in items from overseas. Yes, we dealt with missing items and customs. We dealt with that and I'm satisfied. We dealt with the IT of it, the Asikudo world, which I myself, unless I'm working in customs, really don't get. I understand it, but I never worked in it, so I wouldn't know too much about it. We spoke about the ease of business for people overseas and here. But there are issues that I want to bring up that are of importance in my constituency. I want to bring it down a little bit to my level, so to speak. One of the first things I think of when I hear of customs is the speed of processing or lack thereof. I'll give you an example. I ordered some clothes for my little girl. It took 2 months to clear. I ordered them a bigger size. It took 2 months to clear. She got 2 weeks out of them by the time it got to my house. These are concerns of my constituents as well. The other thing I think of are the duties. Barbadians have reached the stage, they've been there for a while, where we no longer enjoy the privilege of being tourists overseas. We no longer enjoy a restful vacation. Vacations are now for shopping because of the cost to us when it comes to buying everyday items for use. We have now converted vacation time to work in terms of shopping for goods. And this applies to things like people go away now to shop for weddings and for parties and for school, to bring in book bags, to order them online. And the first thoughts that they have is how much duties I will have to pay. And it's hard, especially with a credit card. I know the duties, the cost of living in Barbados. Obviously, yes, COVID is one of the reasons, but for years the cost of living in Barbados has been fairly high. So I did some checking and found out that basic items that we use on every day, everybody in this room use them. For instance, I found out personal items like soap, medicated or otherwise, 40% duties plus VAT. Toilet paper and paper towels, 20% duties plus VAT. Diapers, 20% duties plus VAT. And then we move on to clothing. Clothing for babies, and the Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central, I don't think he was right in saying there are no duties. That is 20% duties on diapers plus VAT. No problem using cloth diapers. I've used them myself, but the convenience is important for our mothers and fathers out there. Clothing for adults and children, T-shirts. Clothing for adults and children outside of T-shirts, 60% plus VAT. T-shirts, 115% plus VAT. These are things that affect my constituents. Things like fruits and vegetables. We're in the era now when we constantly speak about non-communicable diseases and the importance of eating healthy to prevent these, to ease the load on the hospitals and other healthcare institutions. But on checking, I'm seeing things like frozen vegetables and canned vegetables, 20% duties plus VAT. Onions, 216% duties. Tomatoes, 119% duties. Mr. Speaker, these are things that concern me. I know, yes, we're working for customs to make the population more comfortable, to bring jobs and everything. But at the same time, people still have to live and eat. This is where, in my view, we need to push things like everybody in here says, like manufacturing. We need to push things, and I'm sure the Honourable Member for St. Philip South is working assiduously on getting agriculture back up and running properly. Things like canned meat, sardines, for instance, and tuna, the healthiest size of the canned meat, 5% duties, no VAT. And here I have to put a plug in for the women. Sanitary products, well, there's no duties. There's still a 17.5% VAT. These are things that are necessary. They're not privileges. They're necessary. But how do we correct this? Yes, I spoke briefly, I mentioned agriculture just now. I'm pushing the agricultural sector, and this involves education. Barbados is still in a phase, in my view, where we think agriculture is menial, beneath us. I've had the experiences of teachers close to me who attempted to bring agriculture into the outdoor classroom, and many parents look down on it, saying that's not what they send to school the child to learn. But the truth of agriculture is where it's at. For the young people phrase, it is where it is at. We need to change the mindset by way of education of our children in terms of where to go with agriculture, what agriculture can offer, the opportunities it can offer. First step, position education, that we are basically ready to take on the task of increasing agriculture and manufacturing. Research and development, we need to use our people. We've pushed out university graduates, not only from UE, but from all over the world. And it's time that we use these people, if we haven't been, or to increase the use of them, to come up to do the research and do the development in terms of what the overseas market needs. We know that the overseas market loves our Barbados rum. There must be other products that we can use for the overseas market. We need to do the research and development on that in those areas with respect to manufacturing. I remember when I was young, and I made it my business to learn it as I got older, but you see that thing called smocking that raised many of our children? That was one of the most beautiful items I've ever seen in terms of clothing. What has happened? I think the mindset is where is not good enough for the outside market. We just welcomed into the IDC, I think it is, a young lady who does crocheted clothes. And we all know that one was sold to Rihanna or given to Rihanna as a gift. These are things we need to capitalize on our people. But that being said, we need to make it easier for them. We need to give them the know-how. That's where the IDCs and those come in. We need to give them the order how to reach the overseas market, what is needed for the overseas market, concessions, duties for bringing in items for manufacture, make the importation of raw materials easier. Because right now it's easier and cheaper to buy sugar from Guyana, and I admit to doing it, I'm ashamed to say it, to buy sugar from Guyana than having it here, sugar that we produce and we can trust. Make it easier for us to support our local market, ergo the international market. Innovation. I recently met a gentleman, I have known him for years, but he recently came to me with what I thought was a fantastic invention of his, a watch. And he even got the okay from the Swiss government, not the government, a Swiss company who was willing to produce the prototype for him. But the funding is proven difficult, and this is something that I can see, just like our Barbados rum, to benefit the island. Something as fantastic of a prototype of a watch that the Swiss can accept and run with. These are things that our people have in our minds, and we need to understand and respect the value of their inventions and so on. Also, the issue of giving the small businesses timely VAT returns. The truth is, many of us, well, not from maybe pharmacy perspective, many of us depend on VAT returns to actually function, to roll over so that we can buy things and spend them and produce them and get people to buying them. Those are issues we need to look at. Yes, the Honourable Leader Opposition brought up the safety of the customs officers. I myself have heard first-hand stories on that with respect to finding things like guns and drugs in containers that were inspected off-site. And the truth is, the fear was the person who was named, of the people who were being named in owning these containers, these shipments. The perception was, how do I fight somebody that is perceived to be more powerful than me? So a customs officer who has her children to feed or his children to feed will almost certainly weigh the pros and the cons. Do I risk my life in reporting this fellow, or do I let it pass? These are real issues we need to deal with, the safety of our customs officers. But I won't keep you long. Those are some of the things that came to mind when I spoke about customs, and I do understand where we are going with this, and I think it is for the better. But we need, in basically wrapping up my 2-minute speech, we need to get the Barbadian public to understand that our products are just as good as or better from anything coming from the overseas market. We have businesses, if I may say so, Mr. Speaker, Pine Hill Dairy producing some of the best juices, and our farmers producing the best milk that you can find anywhere in the world, really. Places like Boycott Ice Cream, you could hardly find them better, and they've managed to break into the overseas market. Ham, our hams are famous in Canada, but believe it or not, you could find hams that we make here cheaper in Canada than having it here because of the cost of production. We have something called the black belly sheep. Why aren't we looking a little? I think the honourable member, the Minister of Agriculture, is playing with this too and doing something about it. But the black belly sheep, the black belly lamb needs to become worldwide. We don't need to see it in other jurisdictions, and it's no longer called the black belly lamb of Barbados. Rabbit farming is exploding here. Why can't we do it for export? And no doubt the proper port. So these are some of my issues that I want the members of the public to bear in mind, and I speak on behalf of myself, yes, and my constituents, who daily come in front of me complaining about the duties on baby clothes. It's hard for a young mother to buy clothes here, but then the outlet was really to bring it in from Amazon or wherever, but then the duties basically kill them for a piece of clothes that lasts about a month. These things we need to look at in terms of decreasing the duties. I know it probably can't happen now, but the people that are paying these duties are people that sometimes do not have a proper salary, people sometimes who do not work, but they need the items to exist and to live. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That's my small contribution.
Honourable for Christchurch South.
I'm obliged to you, Mr. Speaker. Please accept my guarantee that my intervention will be exceedingly brief. And I heard much of the address by my colleague for Christchurch East Central this morning in my absence from this place, and I came here not intending to speak, except that I was attracted to the portion of his speech in which he made reference to what I may call preferential tariffs, certainly in relation to goods of CARICOM origin. And in this era, I think that continues to be significant, since I see myself as an unrepentant regionalist. What justifies customs, though, I think, is the need to feed, clothe, and house ourselves, and otherwise disport ourselves as a people. And of course, we must have the movement of goods, because by local effort, we cannot do this. We cannot produce all the food and goods and the other items that go towards us disporting ourselves as a people unless we import. And I speak, except that I am a lawyer in these matters. I confess to you, sir, that I speak as a layperson, and therefore I will not visit you with the technical language that you may have heard from other speakers. I speak on this issue as a layperson, except that I speak with a deep interest, as I have indicated to you. And what is customs? Why customs? I see it as the regulated movement of goods across our border, and that is to say, into Barbados. And I have had a professional history in this matter. Sometime, I think some 15 years ago, when I found myself involved in litigation against the Customs Department, without apology, of course, and I introduced myself in the study of that case to WTO and what WTO meant, that 1995, I think, agreement between nations which sought to liberalize trade, and which the thrust of which I thought then was to remove barriers to trade and to make importation a lot easier. And we know that that has had its difficulties for small countries. Ideally, if you're trying to create this global mono economy and to make goods cheaper or to make the access to goods a lot easier, it still disadvantaged small countries. I make the analogy with cricket. It is fine to say that we all face a ball of the same size, but there are countries that have bigger bats. They came into WTO with bigger bats, and they continued in WTO with larger bats, and therefore they remain at an advantage, except that we try to boast to the consumer, the local consumer, well, look, WTO is helping you. It is not only giving you access to goods from the entire world, but it is making those goods cheaper. And as I said, Mr. Speaker, while that obtained, it disadvantaged local producers. I know you expect me to, and I will do it, to remark on the disappearance of many of our local industries. You may know that I'm from Grisette's, and the Grisette's Industrial Park became a ghost town. Apart from the Grisette's Industrial Estate, there was the Harbour Industrial Estate, there was the one in St. Philip, there was the one at Newton, and in recent years you drove by these places and they looked as if bombs had been dropped on them. They looked like a place in Beirut or Gaza. And that, I think, has been as a result of our inability to compete. That has been as a result of the liberalization of trade. So we've had to achieve that balance between liberalized trade and the threat to local industry. It may sound like an old-fashioned view, but it is a view that the furniture manufacturers can speak to you about in this country, that liberalized trade has really hurt them, and it has hurt local industry. And as I've said, we speak of the advantage of price, but let us speak at the same time of the disadvantage of an inability to compete. Now, I said I'd be very brief, and I intend to be very brief, but the portion of the act that caught my attention this morning, further to listening to the Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central, was Section 73 of the Act. And that is more particularly Section 73B of the Act. And I'll read it, Your Honour. For the purposes of this Act, rules of origin means the specific provisions applied to determine the origin of goods and include B, preferential rules of origin established by the community or in accordance with trade agreements to facilitate community trade with certain countries or member states in the same community space. Those words speak volumes as to a new intent against the thrust of the World Trade Organization treaty that affected the entire world. And that portion of the Act is a reminder to me, it is a reminder to this country, I hope, that regionalism is still a moral and a political imperative and an economic imperative. I learned that one is allowed to establish preferential rates, tariffs, if you are part of a bloc. And does this not give political importance to CARICOM and to the continuation of CARICOM, and the importance of recognizing that we cannot, I know it sounds like a cliche, but recognizing that we cannot pursue life in the Caribbean as islands by ourselves, that we must do it as a bloc. And we have had examples, or cricket, or carnivals, higher academia, which is to say the UWI. Those have been outstanding examples of regional success. And to that now, we add customs. And I say customs not as a policing department, but customs as a department of facilitation of trade. We also learned that when we were doing the case, that customs is not a place that you approach with trepidation. Customs is a place that you approach knowing the rules, knowing the tariffs, knowing the rates, and expecting that you will be facilitated. I would not have completed this address, Your Honor, unless I remind you that there is still a lot of feeling out there that some people are disadvantaged at customs, and this is not a criticism of the department. This is to explain and to expose a reality that too many of our business people and too many of our small business people believe that customs is a hostile environment. And they believe that not because of the personality of customs officers. I'm the last person to speak on the personalities of customs officers and to do so with criticism. I have relatives who have worked there, so I would not do that. But yes, I have relatives who work there. But it is systemic. It is systemic. The perception has been that persons, I used the analogy of persons with big backs a few minutes ago. The perception had been that persons with big backs enjoy preferential treatment in customs. And I think that is related to the history, not of the department, but a systemic history in which only the well-to-do did business. And that persons who came into business in recent years found themselves, according to their perception, at a disadvantage. They found themselves not knowing, in many cases, the rules and not knowing how the movement of goods should be transacted. And hopefully, with this new legislation, all of that comes to an end. Hopefully, they now see customs as a department of facilitation. They see customs as less of a police officer stopping goods, but they see customs as another department of government which is intended to do good by the people. But my main point here is that we now look at customs not only as a national department, but we look at customs as a regional department. And I'm so happy that it gives a new breath of life to the integration movement. It gives a new breath of life to regionalism and the concept of regionalism for us to understand that Guyana and St. Lucia and Trinidad and Jamaica and Haiti are really not so far from each other. In fact, from New York to California is a farther distance, I believe, than Guyana to Haiti. Yet we have been taught to see ourselves as powers, separate powers in this region. As I've said before in a previous speech, we have been separated by language. We need to understand that language should not any longer separate us. And one of the concerns I have as a regionalist is that we still cling to this term English-speaking Caribbean. And I don't know where we stand, where the customs legislation stands in relation to the non-English speaking Caribbean islands, but I don't think that language should separate us as a trading bloc. I really don't think. Language, it is just a matter of translating French to English and vice versa. So that Minister and Mr. Speaker, I would hope that this act, and indeed the treaty, and the concept of trading bloc transcend the issue of language, and that Guadeloupe and Martinique, which are so close to us, will not be seen as entities distant by language. So yes, I support the legislation. I had no intention of making a contribution when I came here, since I was satisfied with the address, the speech by the honorable member for Christchurch East Central. As a matter of fact, I remarked while I was on my way here in my car that it sounded as if I was present at a seminar. He was so comprehensive as he moved from part to part of the act. But Admittedly, the portion which caught my attention was the portion which referred to CARICOM, and I would like the public to be aware that this legislation promotes in a very real and substantial way the idea of CARICOM, the idea of regionalism, as I've said, as it has done with other areas of our life, not least of all our music, our culture, the arts, and it does this within the very bedrock of social life. That is to say, at the level of the transfer, the movement of goods. And really, there's a sense in which that is the foundation of all life, our need to consume goods. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm obliged to you for allowing me this shortest of interventions and to say that I support the legislation, and I hope that there will be no collision as between this act and the WTO, and I hope that there shall be no future collision between business people of all strata, that there shall be no future collision between business people and a regime of customs. I am obliged to you, Your Honor.
Honourable Member Christchurch, East Central.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank all honourable members for their contributions, and I'll certainly be very brief, sir, in my in my conclusion. There are just a few things I would just like to raise just in response to a few comments. As it relates to a strategy for growth, sir, and I've been at pains, as well as others, to indicate that a lot of what we have been doing in government is intended, from the reform perspective, really is to focus on efficiency and removing where time is an issue to be able to help reallocate resources to actually dealing with production. So the honourable member for St. James Central, when he went through the example that he gave with respect to the time that people take to do other things other than dealing with getting on with their actual business, these are some of the soft reforms, if you like, sir, or the soft impacts from the reforms that actually helps to propel growth within the context of the sector. So unless you deal substantively, sir, with the structure of government, which certainly in this case customs and the other regulatory agencies we are working to so do, that this forms one part of how we will be able to trigger growth, because at the end of the day, if people are not spending time waiting in line, moving around the country, even though, sir, some may argue that the revenue from the fuel tax may be of a benefit, the reality is, sir, that we don't want that time to be wasted with respect to administration, because that too adds cost to the process. But outside of the actual reforms, as you know, sir, the doing business framework that we have been undertaking across the length and breadth of government, and very shortly the public will see, as I mentioned during my opening statements, that the puzzle pieces are being put together, sir, and those puzzle pieces, I hope the honourable member for St. Michael West will be able to recognize the growth when the puzzle pieces are all put into place, sir, and the execution is being done. It is important to recognize that we come at this from a very serious, from the perspective that the serious actions that we have taken to not just look at how government is financed. I hear the honourable member for St. Philip North with respect to the perspective that certainly my constituents and all of our constituents experience. The way to get out of this, though, Mr. Speaker, the way out of this is certainly the very growth that the Honourable Leader of the Opposition has spoken to, and to the extent then that, Mr. Speaker, that we are able to actually trigger a level of income for all of our constituents to be able to navigate what certainly has become a very dynamic environment. As it stands at the moment, given the COVID situation And as I said, we have, and it is not to say, Mr. Speaker, that we have not, that this government have not, hasn't responded, and I will do so in a different form a little later. But the reality is, sir, that within the construct for which we are providing public goods and public services to the public, the Customs Department, as well as the Revenue Authority, and I would say, and all the other revenue agencies, but these are the two critical ones. We have to be capable, sir, of financing the public policy that we're executing. One could argue that this tax is too high or this is too low or whatever the case is, sir. My perspective is that we have to refocus our attention to the quality of services that we're getting from the government, given what is being expended. And as part of Barbados, sir, that I certainly have benefited as someone from Bank Hall, sir, not too far from you.
Turkins, to be exact.
The Turkins, sir. And experience all that Barbados has had to offer. I share the perspective that the development of our country requires us to be able to recognize that as we move through our various stages of life, sir, we must recognize that we must bring people along with us on the journey. And taxation, sir, and the paying of taxes is part of that process, simply because, sir, the service provision that we all have received from the government over the years, unless, sir, we are sufficiently independently rich, for lack of a better term, sir, most of us, all of us in the country, have had to share and pull together, sir, to be able to move from one stage of our life to another, be it via education, whether it is accessing health care, or any of the social services, sir, for which we may need to call upon, whether it is, as I said earlier, sir, whether it is those collective services that we may not need every day, but when we pick up the phone and call, we need to know that the fire service will respond, sir, or the police will respond, or whoever within that context. But that is not to say, Mr. Speaker, that the government has not been focusing on, one, the quality of the services that are being delivered, because we feel that that is important in the context of the public. But the way that public policy is financed, sir, we have to be very careful within with the conversations that we are having about choosing to pay this or the next tax, sir. It is a balance. And in the same way that we recognize that collecting revenue, sir, is a particularly specialist task. The cash flow requirements for government, so trade happens every day around our ports, and therefore the management of the cash flow, the Customs Department allows for a certain level of cash coming into the Treasury that allows the certainty with respect to what is taking place. So as I said, sir, these are just one of the very critical reform measures that will be undertaken as part of the wider work of government. I do have just a few amendments, sir, just to make in committee with respect to just some little clarity in terms of the bill in certain sections, just to make sure that it is abundantly clear with respect to some, not substantive, but just to provide clarity for which the thing is to be applied. But we are comfortable, sir, that the way and the next phase of this process is for the next mission with respect to customs, sir, is for the further development of the regulations to bring them into the 21st century. The technical assistance has already been requested in relation to that, and so as soon as the bill certainly is passed and gone through the chamber, sir, the regulations will come shortly thereafter, such that we have a total framework within which the Customs Department will operate with a modern set of legislation, and that I hope, sir, that with the good work that the Honourable Member for St. James Central and his ministry is doing on the single window, the Honourable Member for St. Michael South, sir, dealing with his side with respect to the maritime space. I know that the Honourable Member for Christchurch East is similarly working on the immigration side, sir, such that, and the Honourable Member for St. Philip South working with respect to the SPS legislation and those other pieces which will come to complete the picture, that we really would be in a position not just to modernize the legislation, but really to create opportunities, sir, for Barbadians to take advantage of. And the reason for that, sir, is in a lot of instances, there are a lot of non-tariff barriers that prevent people from doing and accessing certain things. And we are addressing those things so that anybody in Barbados who's capable of producing something will have the framework within which they can, through customs, will be able to provide the verification, sir, of, customs and the other regulatory agencies, the verification that allows them access into the market such that we can literally grow and expand the productive capacity within the context of Barbados. So this is serious work, sir. It is, as I said, one part of the overarching puzzle, but we are confident that once we make these pieces of legislation, we bring them onto the statute books, then we give the private sector the opportunity to invest, sir. We are able to attract more investment into the country because we are able to deal with these matters, and with that, we are then creating opportunities for expansion and for, hopefully, sir, small businesses to become medium and large, become regional in their context, take advantage of the entire framework, such that we can leverage some of the investment that we know that we can leverage in this space, which allows us to be able to deal with a whole range of issues that certainly have been long-standing. So, Mr. Speaker, I am happy to have been able to have this debate today. This is perhaps long in coming, and we are confident that as we move out of COVID, the economy reopens, that once the citizens, all of the participants within the context of the customs network, for lack of a better term, sir, that once they embrace the use of technology, the officers themselves, with respect to not just new equipment, but training, are equally in a position to help support the transition, then we are confident that the growth that we are anticipating with respect to facilitation and opening up of opportunities, sir, will be there. All that is required, sir, is for the private sector to be able to execute. And so we are confident that this is part of the way forward. And with those very, very, very few words, sir, I beg to move that this bill be read a second time.
The question is that the aforementioned bill be read a second time. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. Honourable Leader, Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the suspension of the sitting until 5:45 p.m.
The question is that this honourable chamber be suspended until 5:45 p.m. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This honourable chamber stands suspended until 5:45 p.m.